Thank you for being here today. Today is our annual Homeless Memorial Day. And my name is Donald Whitehead. I am the Executive Director for the National Coalition for the Homeless. I have been doing this work for a really long time, over a quarter of a century. And we, as a national coalition, have been doing this work longer than anybody else. We are the oldest advocacy group that works on behalf of people experiencing homelessness exclusively. I am grateful for the opportunity to be here. And again, if you could please mute yourselves when you come on. We didn't mute everybody because we wanted to make sure we had enough time for the speakers. So when you come on, please mute yourself so that our speakers have the opportunity to be heard. So again, I'm grateful for the opportunity to be with you today. Each year we gather to honor the lives of those who have been lost far too soon, lives that have had their dreams deferred. It is estimated that between 17,500 and 46,500 homeless deaths occurred in 2018, and we're still working out the 2019 numbers. But these figures should not be interpreted as a firm estimate of a total annual homeless death count. Research indicates that the pit count, the data is significantly underestimates homelessness, and homeless deaths are probably considerably higher. Uh, this year, a group got together, including the National Coalition for the Homeless and the National Healthcare for the Health Council, got together to put together a dashboard. And hopefully, moving forward with that dashboard, and hopefully your involvement in helping us with that count, we'll be able to get really accurate numbers going forward. I do believe, though, that the number is a lot closer to 45,000 than it is to 16,000. And also, I'll say this, that one death without a home is far too many in the richest country in the history of the world. We have been memorializing the deaths of people experiencing homelessness for an exceptionally long time. The first organized event happened in the early 80s. There was a statewide event in Minnesota. That was the first organized Memorial Day back in 1985. 33 years ago in Atlanta, the Metro Area Task Force found a box of cards with the name of 500 men who had lived and died at the Atlanta Union Mission. That was in 1987. Since 1990, on or near December 21st, the first day of winter, the longest night of the year, the winter solstice, the National Coalition for the Homeless has sponsored Homeless Memorial Day to bring attention to the tragedy of homelessness and to remember our homeless friends who have paid the ultimate price for our nation's failure to end homelessness. Beginning in 2005, the National Healthcare for the Homeless Council and the National Consumer Advisory Board joined NCH as co-sponsors of this meaningful event. Today, you will hear and see many names. It is so important that we remember those names. So often, those names are reduced to numbers in a point in time count or unique identifiers on a by name list. Many forget that they are much more than those numbers. They are fathers and mothers, brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles. To the people that are on that list, it is my hope that they may rest in peace. For many, this will be the first chance they've had to rest in peace for a long time. Although they are no longer with us, they are no longer without. The 23rd Psalm says, "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil." Those living on the streets of our country must fear evil on a daily basis. They must fear evil deeds like the many hate crimes that are perpetrated every year, the fire bombings, the burnings, the beatings. 1,852 people have died over the last 20 years as a result of hate crimes. They must also fear the inaction of their government. It seems like we say this every year. In a year where we've seen images of poverty and despair broadcast over the airwaves as a result of the most recent inadequate performance by our government during the coronavirus epidemic, we again memorialize those that are the victims of the federal government's long-term inadequacies. Perhaps the biggest fear that I hear when I speak to homeless people is the fear of acceptance. They fear that we live in a society that has accepted the image of people lying on our sidewalks and babies being born in abandoned buildings. We do not have to be satisfied with these conditions. Let us use these deaths as a catalyst to voice our dissatisfaction with the unacceptable conditions in the richest country in the history of the world. And where do we go from here? Dr. Martin Luther King said, "Let us be dissatisfied until America will no longer have a high blood pressure of creeds and an anemia of deeds. Let us be dissatisfied until the tragic walls that separate the outer cities of wealth and comfort and the inner city of poverty and despair shall be crushed by the battering rams of the forces of justice. Let us be dissatisfied until those that live on the outskirts of hope are brought into the metropolis of daily security. Let us be dissatisfied until the slums are cast into the junk heaps of history and every family is living in a decent home." And I'll end by saying we should all be dissatisfied. I thank you very much for listening to my opening. I hope I gave you some context on the history of this very important event. We unfortunately had a cancellation at the very end of our planning for today. So a couple of our faith leaders will not be with us today, but we know we can do an expression of faith in more than one way. Today, that expression of faith will come through music, and we will now have a selection by Jeff Olivet. Jeff, thank you very much, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you, Donald. It's nice to see so many familiar names and faces, even on a sad day and a sad gathering. This is the 24th year in a row that I've been one of many musicians all over the country offering our song to commemorate those who have died. And so many of those musicians have been homeless themselves. And as we read names, as we remember friends and faces and people, so many were musicians and artists and philosophers and intellectuals and activists. And 24 years is too many years, and it's too many names. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found, was blind, but now I see. People get ready, there's a train a-coming. You don't need no baggage, you just get on board. All you need is faith to hear the diesels humming. You don't need no ticket, you just thank the Lord. So people get ready, there's a train to Jordan. It's picking up passengers from coast to coast. Faith is the key, open the doors and board them. There there's hope for all amongst them who love the most. Through many dangers, toils, and snares, we have already come. 'Twas grace hath brought us safe thus far, and grace will lead us home. Grace will lead us home.
Jeff, I thank you so much. What a beautiful expression. Thank you for sharing with us, and thank you for doing it for over 20 years. As I mentioned in my beginning, sometimes homelessness is reduced to numbers and statistics, but there's so much more to people. And today we will next hear stories, personal stories about people that we've lost this year. And we have three amazing people sharing stories from people that have been lost this year. So India, could you start us off?
Thank you, Donald. My name is India Pagarcher, and I'm a Master of Public Health candidate at Vanderbilt University, and I also work for a nonprofit called Open Table Nashville. Open Table exists to journey with the marginalized, disrupt cycles of poverty, and provide education around issues of homelessness. Through these positions and under the guidance of Vanderbilt Cornelius Professor Dr. Mary Beth Shin, I've spent the past 6 months building upon Nashville's community-based approach to homeless mortality surveillance. As part of this work, I've spent my time collecting the names of friends, family, and loved ones who were either experiencing homelessness at the time of their death or who were housed when they passed but had a known history of homelessness. Through my efforts, I've collected so much more than a list of names, though. I've collected words, stories, memories, dreams, laughs, tears, frustration, dismay, and awe. Today, I want to stand in awe of all of our friends on the streets as the resilient survivors of broken housing, political, and economic systems that they are. I want to call out the unjust circumstances surrounding the deaths of our friends. I want to remember the friend who was found dead in the chute of a donation bin, the friend who was found trying to live underneath someone else's home and who was then transported to the hospital where he died. I remember the friend who burned to death in his sleeping bag that caught on fire in the middle of the night. I remember countless friends who were hit by cars in Nashville this year. At least one was hit by a drunk driver and multiple involved in hit and run accidents. I remember the friend who we did not know had passed, nor did his family, until we found his tombstone at the Indigent Burial Ground on All Souls Day. I remember the friend whose temporary grave marker at this same burial ground only bore his last name, so we wrote on his first name with Sharpie. I bring up these circumstances because no one should die more than 30 years before their time, nor should they do so in such ghastly ways. But we are here today not only to remember the tragic deaths, but also to celebrate the lives of our friends. We remember Jesse, Happy, and Anthony, who were beloved poets in our Nashville community. We remember Lisa, who was dreaming of going to graduate school, and Shirley, who was working to open her own nonprofit. We remember Verge, the motorcycle enthusiast who loved Black Biker Week in Myrtle Beach, and Michael, who loved snack cakes and the Dallas Cowboys. We remember Maymay, a medical assistant, Rodney, a barber, and Greg, a professional trumpet player, and so many more. 130 in totality and counting so far in Nashville in 2020 alone, our highest annual death toll yet. Our inequitable housing market continues to leave our most vulnerable on the streets, where they attempt to grapple with death and disease on a daily basis as they navigate homelessness. I yearn for a way to transform how society views our friends on the streets, under bridges, in camps, in the woods, in cars, on couches of friends and family. For a way to reiterate to folks that homelessness is an experience, one among many, that does not take away someone's worth or rights. Today, we recognize housing as a human right. Housing is healthcare and a foundational part of public health, something that this year and pandemic has only further confirmed. I yearn for a day when the general public does not turn a blind eye to someone on the street corner in disgust and judgment, but instead directs these feelings towards those who are supposed to be our government leaders working for the people, all people, towards the people who uphold systemic poverty and racism that disproportionately affects our friends on the streets. As someone recently reminded me, poverty is a choice we make for others. So on this Homeless Person's Memorial Day, I encourage all listening to get involved. Do not be the person that turns the blind eye. Donate to organizations who are doing on-the-ground outreach and advocacy alongside those experiencing homelessness. If you cannot donate, roll down your window with a mask on next time you see a friend selling a paper. Ask them how their day is. Get to know your neighbors. Ask what your council person is doing to prevent evictions in your community during this pandemic. Do anything you have the capacity to do. Just do something. Our friends deserve more than crumbs from the table. And with this, I'll leave you with a quote by Mother Jones that's often shared by Open Table. I ask you to remember to pray for the dead and fight like hell for the living. Thank you.
All rise. This court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Greg Mann.
India, thank you so much. And again, if you are, if you could please, we hear some background noise. Someone has not muted themselves. If we could all please mute ourselves if we're not one of the speakers. Thank you so much. Our next speaker is Catherine Kavanaugh, who was really instrumental in putting together, along with Regina Reed, today's itinerary and also bringing all the speakers. So Catherine?
Yeah, thank you, Donald. I am Catherine Kavanaugh, the Consumer Advocacy Manager with the National Healthcare for the Homeless Council. And I'm actually based out of the Baltimore Healthcare for the Homeless Council or Baltimore Healthcare for the Homeless. And I wanted to share a little bit about a friend that we lost this year. He was a dedicated advocate. Paul Baylor was staying on the streets staying in a shelter when COVID hit. And after that, he felt like the shelters weren't a safe place to be, so he went back onto the streets. And one night when he was staying on the streets, he was robbed and killed for a couple dollars, just continuing in the cycle of violence and poverty in our communities. And wanted to share some words from another colleague of mine, Vanessa Boratz, who worked with Paul for years. And so here's some thoughts that she wanted to share about Paul, who we miss and wanted to honor here. Paul Baylor was a dedicated advocate for people experiencing homelessness. He served in roles such as a speaker for the Baltimore Areas of FACE's Speaker of Homelessness Speakers Bureau, writer and editor for the Word on the Street newspaper, and he was a founding member of a grassroots organizing group of people experiencing homelessness called Housing Our Neighbors, as well as an advocate on numerous advisory boards. Paul was tireless in his efforts to raise awareness of the injustice of homelessness, advocating for policies that would help end homelessness and improve services while people waited. Vanessa got to know Paul best writing and discussing ideas together at a weekly writers group at the local Healthcare for the Homeless program. Paul enjoyed playing with puns and creating clever word poems peppered with rhyming couplets. Separatism equals terrorism, inclusion equals solution was a concept that Paul developed and often talked about in writers group and in Word on the Street. Paul grew up in Catonsville, Maryland, and worked as a concert piano tuner and rebuilder for decades before experiencing homelessness. Through the 8 years that we knew Paul, he cycled in and out of homelessness a few times. He would land a job or have a great connection that would allow him to move into a place, but his work and wages were never stable enough. And before long, he would fall behind in rent payments and end up losing his home and become homeless again. Paul's tragic death by robbing and murder could have been prevented if Paul was able to go to sleep on a bed instead of a bench on a bus stop. Paul believed in inclusion as the solution to homelessness. He died because of the systemic housing injustice that left him marginalized and vulnerable on the streets. Paul understood firsthand that the dehumanization of people experiencing homelessness makes society numb to the violence of poverty and the homelessness that terrorizes our friends. Inclusion is the solution. Everyone deserves to go home. Thank you.
Catherine, thank you so much. Again, just amazing words and really fitting for Paul. I knew Paul myself, a wonderful person. And all of the people we're talking about today are wonderful people. Our next speaker does not require an introduction. If you work on homeless issues from an advocacy standpoint, she is a tireless, fearless advocate for people experiencing homelessness. Our next speaker is Barbara DiPietro.
Thank you, Donald, and thank you everybody for being here. I want to just spend a minute remembering Zena Kellum. Zena was a life force. Her smile and her laugh would light up a room, and she spent several years of her life living on the ramp to the Healthcare for the Homeless program in Baltimore City. And many of us who work there got to know Zena over time because you would come out after a day's work and Zena would be in her spot and she would hold court. And so you'd sit and you'd talk about the day. And Zena struggled with mental health and the years were hard on her, and like they are on many women, especially living on the street. And we say that we prioritize the most vulnerable people for housing in our community, but Zena was the most vulnerable. And it took us years to get her housed in a system that continues to make housing hard to get. And in the end, it wasn't her mental health that got Zena, it was her heart. Like many people, cardiovascular disease and many chronic illnesses that are preventable with good care and good housing, but are far too elusive for all of the people that we've come to remember today. And the deaths that we have from preventable chronic illness is an injustice in this country of so many resources and with so much, but we have so little for so many as well. And in the end, we got Zena into housing and she flourished. A bright, beautiful apartment. She thrived. And she was doing so great. And we were all, Zena was the one that as healthcare providers, as service providers, you took heart in knowing that Zena was doing great. And on the night before her wedding, her heart did her in and she didn't make it to her wedding day. I am convinced that those years on our front porch, on the ramp, on living on Baltimore streets, they took Zena's life away from her. She would have lived more years if those few years that she had on the streets were not on the streets, if she was living in stable housing. I am convinced she'd still be with us today. I raise Zena here as an example because we are remembering so many friends. So many people who lived in homelessness, who maybe died in homelessness, but they didn't have to die. And I am so honored by the respect that everybody here has brought, just not from the individuals that we're remembering today, but from the collective of all of our spirits and our commitment to doing better going forward. I am committed to ending homelessness, and I am hoping that all of us are here too. Thank you.
Barbara, thank you so much. Such passionate words. I really, I talked about your passion in the beginning, but thank you so much for letting everybody else have the opportunity to hear it. For the next few moments, if we could, we'd like to roll a video of some of the names that we've lost. Again, this is a fraction of the names we've lost, but if we could please observe a moment of silence while we play these names, we would greatly appreciate it. So can we roll the names? we want to thank Megan Hustings for putting that together. Deputy Director of the National Coalition for the Homeless. Thank you so much for all the time it took. It's really daunting to see all of those names, and yet it's about 5% of those that we've lost this year. But thank you all for your observance of the moment of silence. Uh, all of those wonderful people do deserve just a little bit of time to respect their lives and their loss. We're going to continue with the program. Our next presenter is Charlotte Gardner from Houston. She's also a member of the NCAB, the National Consumer Advisory Board, and she's going to share with us some poetry. Charlotte?
Thank you so much, Donald. Hello, everyone. As Donald said, that I would be sharing with you, my name is Charlotte Garner, and I am a member of the steering committee, a regional representative for 6 and 8, as well as the chairperson for the local CAB of Healthcare for the Homeless Houston. I have 2 messages today. First of all, one is remember the love. Come, let us take time to remember the dear souls that have gone on home. Let us cherish their precious memories, for each was surely one of our own. We've set ablaze the candles to carry on their life's light, for their souls have merged with the stars in the heavens to be adored in the calm of the night. They shared their special kind of joy as only they could give, though they rest in the bosom of Abraham. By the love in our hearts, they yet live. For to be absent from this old earthly body is surely to be present with Christ. And thinking from that point of view makes death seem a small sacrifice. So we set aside this time to memorialize all those who have gone on before and to give adoration and praise to our Lord, whom we truly adore. Weep not, I say to each of you, for this is just cause to celebrate. For I find joy in knowing that I'll see a familiar face at the pearly gate. Though each is now a citizen of God's kingdom, a member of the heavenly host, they come down as angels to keep watch over us whenever we remember the love. My second message is called Celebration of Life. We've all come together, but not in the customary way. Yet we still assemble because of the importance of this day. We're in different locations, yet all in the same place, sharing this special momentous occasion, thanks to God's grace. We find ourselves in a season the likes of which has never been seen before. And it is for this cause we strive to come together all the more. We stretch our hands in your direction as we pray that God would cover you with his love and protection. Moreover, we came to spread cheer and the love of God, because being in this place is particularly hard. Dealing with isolation is more than a notion, yet we're blessed to share this momentous devotion. By the way, know it's okay to shed a tear, for there's a void left by those no longer here. We reflect on the good times and remember the best lessons, for the time we shared was filled with blessings. We strive to hold our heads up high as we look in faith up to the sky. Without a doubt, we can all tell he's the God who does all things well. So we pray to him for his mercy and healing, because the pain of loss is a terrible feeling. And just when we think that we can't take it, he gives us the double portion of grace just so we can make it. As the dawning of a new day appears, we cast our cares on him right along with our fears. Our loved ones we know are not forgotten, for they now reside with the only begotten. Citizens of the heavenly host are a special agent kind of ghost. Diligent on duty, they keep watch over us. Our faith is in God, and it is in him do we trust. For we look forward to the great reunion we know will take place, when at the pearly gates we will once again see each and every face. No more misery, grief, or strife. Then we will have a celebration of life. Thank you.
Charlotte, thank you so much. What amazing poetry. That was fantastic. We really appreciate you. That really was incredible. So we're going to move on to our next speaker. But again, just for housekeeping sake, if you could, everyone, please mute your microphone so that we can give full concentration to our speakers here. Our next speaker is the dynamic voice of the National Healthcare for the Homeless Council. He is our keynote for this particular engagement. Please welcome Bobby Watts.
Thank you, Donald. And thank you, Charlotte. You really are the poet laureate of NCAB and of the National Healthcare for the Homeless Council. Thank you. It warms my heart to see we have almost 200 people that have gathered at this point in time to remember those that many people will not remember otherwise. I want to begin by remembering those who started this important observance 30 years ago. My understanding is 30 years ago, John Logier, the founding executive director of the National Healthcare for the Homeless Council, with his colleagues from the National Coalition for the Homeless, said that we need to remember and to mark the fact that people are dying while they are experiencing homelessness. We need to draw attention to this. I was recently privileged to sit in and to observe the Homeless Persons Memorial Day of the NYU Langone program, which originally was the program started by Dr. Phil Brickner and staffed ably and led in subsequent years by Barbara Kananen and staffed with Marianne Savarese and others of that excellent team. And at each of their Homeless Person Memorial Day observances over the years, they include this quote that I'd like to read. For every hour and every moment, thousands of men leave life on this earth, and their souls appear before God. And how many of them depart in solitude, unknown, sad, dejected, that no one mourns for them or even knows whether they have lived or not. It is so important that we are saying that we are here to remember. And this is a tradition that is part of our human nature that has gone on for years and years. Cicero said that the love you gave in life keeps people alive beyond their time. Anyone who has given love will always live on in another's heart. We are remembering the names and the people associated with those names, not because they were perfect, but because they were. We want to recognize the fact that they were here among us and that they were valuable in God's sight, and they are important and they are valued by us. I'd like to say it also adds significance to their lives and the lessons their lives have for us. If we are to draw, if we draw joy from the good times we've had with them, to reflect on their good qualities and see where we should try to imitate those good qualities, that will add value to our lives. We have seen some of the characteristics of that were read by India of those in Nashville. It was so important to remember them as individuals. As someone has said, for the living, the real marks they leave are the ones they've left on us. A hug, a smile, a timely word of advice. We want to remember those we've loved and lost, not only for them, but also, as importantly, for ourselves, to mend, to heal, to live, and never to forget. It's a way of keeping them part. It's a way of keeping part of them with us. We have seen some of the individuals' names to help us remember them and remember their names as individuals. I like to think of them as mighty redwoods, I picture them as trees. And I want to try to picture them better and become better by reflecting on where they were good and did good and kind things. This is an awesome task and opportunity for us. I am so glad that we scroll the names. And names are so important. Someone has said that the most important thing a person has and the sweetest sound to their ears is their name. And we are remembering them by name. Now, when we think of a name, when I think of the name of John Logier or Donald Whitehead, I'm not thinking of how many syllables does it have or how many consonants, how many vowels. I'm not, but I'm thinking of what is associated, the conversations I've had with those people, with the things that they stand for their character, for their whole being. So we remember names because that is saying we remember everything about the person. And we see that each one of those names is associated with a person that is infinitely valuable. However, we should not just see them as a single mighty tree, but as one of a multitude. And this is a time when we step back and we look at individuals, but we don't just see the individuals, but we see the multitude of trees and we see the forest. And that is also an awesome thing. And it's also an awful thing. Awful because of the large number of people we have lost and the fact that we are still losing people to homelessness in such large numbers 30 years after we have begun to remember them. Now we know that death is inevitable, but when, how, and from which causes one dies is not inevitable. One thing we know is that homelessness is harmful to one's health and homelessness is deadly. Homelessness kills, steals, and destroys. It destroys opportunities, steals health, and kills all too soon. Research has shown that the average age of those who die while unsheltered is in the mid 40s to early 50s. This has been pretty consistent over the years that we've been looking at it, and it seems to be pretty consistent even even when we look at this in other countries. But put that figure of maybe up to an average of up to the early 50s compared to the average life expectancy in the United States of 78 years. And we see that on average, we're losing about 25 to 30 years due to homelessness from each life, from those who are unsheltered. From being exposed to the sun, the rain, the snow, the cold, predators and assault, sleeplessness, trauma, and infectious diseases. From being denied the opportunity to sit and recuperate by resting one's weary bones and feet at the end of a long day, perhaps spent walking the streets. Being denied the common dignity of being able to empty one's bladder and bowels at regular intervals. Being denied the ability to wash one's hands and bodies daily, or even being denied the opportunity to wash one's clothes takes a toll on the body, mind, and spirit. That is one's health. Continued exposure to harm and denial of human needs because you don't have stable housing makes it hard to get and stay clean and sober, to keep one's medical appointments and keep and sustain healthy relationships or a job. The cumulative effect we see is to speed up decline and results in premature death. India referred to Nashville's observance, where we had 128 names at that time. Now it's up to 130, we hear. Now there are 130 people on the list, which is more than the year before, and more than the year before that, and more than the year before that. And as she said, it's the most we've ever had, the highest number in 30 years of keeping track of this. Now, it's unfortunate that we really don't know how many people have died while experiencing homelessness, and that's a shame. We count what we value, and society as a whole does not care enough to count these deaths or classify them based on whether they are housed or not. But we care. And as Donald said, in 2019, the National Healthcare for the Homeless Council, the National Coalition for the Homeless, and other organizations came together to look at this issue. And we have created a mortality toolkit, which you'll hear more about. And the purpose is that we want to have more people count the names so that we can see the dimensions of the problem. And that when we do, we can do something about it. So today's Homeless Person Memorial Day should not only help us remember those we've lost, but to honor them by helping to protect those who are still experiencing homelessness. So here are some examples of how some people have taken the information that they've gathered over the years and used that for advocacy and to effect positive change. And this toolkit is to help motivate us, more of us, to do that. In Sacramento, Bob Erlenbush used the data, and they saw that they needed to have more nurse outreach, so the city council allocated funding for that. They were able to show that people are dying at pretty evenly in all seasons, not just in the winter. So the limited winter-only shelter became a year-round shelter and open 24/7 instead of limited hours. In Colorado, they used the data to exact or to implement a tax that will lead to 1,800 people receiving housing. So those are some examples of how people have used this information to make things better. In the Nashville observance on Saturday, of the 128 people at that time, their age of death was known for almost all of them. And the ages ranged from less than 1 month to 74 years old. Think about that. The two oldest people, age 74, Millard and James, died younger than the average person dies in this country. So we see the impact that homelessness has on health and on premature death. As each name was read on that list, I said to myself with statistical near certainty after each name, too soon, premature death, preventable death. After 128 times, I was heavy with sadness and also energized with anger, hopefully righteous anger, that we cared so little for our neighbors that we didn't provide a roof for them to come in out of the elements, a place to rest, a place that they could be safe from attackers. As we remember the individuals and we look at each tree as unique, we also look at the forest that is being destroyed by wildfires of hatred and contempt, by rainstorms of attacks, of a polar vortex of cold indifference to our neighbors. We are here to remember, reflect, and also resolve to make this situation right. Whatever you think you can do to help, write your federal or local officials to make housing affordable, to make services available, to educate your housed neighbor to the needs of your unhoused neighbors, or simply care and lend a helping hand, a kind word, a smile. Whatever we can do, whatever you can do, please do it. It's more important now than ever. With COVID, it's likely that so the advocacy lessons are needed and they will have more effect because this is an opportunity. The country has responded in unprecedented ways to help people experiencing homelessness, at least in the beginning. With attention focused again now on solutions, it's an opportunity to help address long-standing iniquities. As Howard in Nashville said Saturday, it shouldn't have taken a pandemic for me to get housed. He's right, but nonetheless, we may be able to use this and to get more people housed. As Dr. Cheryl Ho of Santa Clara, California, who saw her health department house 1,100 people in motels on a dime, said, I always used to say but I didn't really know if I believed that we could really solve homelessness. Now I've seen what we can do, and nobody can tell me that we can't. We can do this. It's within our power to make government responsive. So with each name that was read, with each name that you think of, let each person that you remember, let's resolve to make the situation right so that this will be one of the last homeless person Memorial Days that we will ever need, and the very last one with so many names to remember. Thank you.
Bobby, thank you so much. Incredible. Thank you for your passion. And thank you for telling us that we should move from the mourning that we have for people into action. It's about taking these names and using them as a catalyst for our movement. And it's a perfect segue to the next part of what we talk about. And that's going to be, what is that call to action? Rachel Biggs and Pia Valvasori from the Orlando Healthcare for the Homeless are going to talk to us about what we need to take this moment and move forward to do, the action that's necessary. So Rachel and Pia.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rachel Biggs. I'm the chair of the National Healthcare for the Homeless Council's Policy Committee. I'm also the policy director at Albuquerque Healthcare for the Homeless. I'm so thankful to have this opportunity to come together today, and I'm really mourning being together in person in Albuquerque with our community. But I'm excited to talk to you about a call to action, our mortality toolkit. Bobby really gave a great introduction of why this work was so important. In 2019, the National Healthcare for the Homeless Council's Policy Committee recognized the need to really elevate homeless mortality data in our collective policy and advocacy work. And we really recognize that we need to bear witness and speak out and use this data to affect really positive policy changes to end homelessness. So this high quality group quickly came together to unite expertise on homelessness and homeless mortality reviews across the country. The work group includes a diverse range of experts and researchers charged with sharing best practices on how localities carry out homeless mortality work and how to best utilize mortality data in our collective advocacy work to end homelessness. I'd like for you to all visit the National Healthcare for the Homeless Council website and share it widely. You can see the toolkit here on the screen. We hope that this tool can be used to help more localities across the country engage their local policymakers, public health authorities, and medical examiner or coroner's offices about the need to better understand the causes of homeless deaths. The work group continues to advocate that our systems document housing status, and will continue to encourage more cities to count the number of people experiencing homelessness that die in homelessness each year. These counts are crucial in highlighting the vast and largely hidden scale of homeless deaths in the United States. This essential information is needed to advocate for what we already know ends homelessness: investment in affordable housing and access to healthcare. Throughout the toolkit are excellent examples of cities, including Denver, Sacramento, Los Angeles, Philadelphia, of how they use their mortality data to influence policy changes in substance use treatment, outreach, and investment in affordable housing. You heard some of these great examples when Bobby spoke of them. We're really encouraging anyone interested in this work to visit the toolkit to find out how to engage with our work group and seek guidance in starting your own local homeless mortality report. We can't urge enough the importance of remembering those that we have lost in homelessness, and to ensure that we do not let those names and this data be for nothing. We want this to elevate the work of our national policy and advocacy work, our local policy work, to ensure that not another person dies in homelessness. I'll now hand it over to our fellow work group member, Pia, to speak more about the importance of the Homeless Mortality Toolkit. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Rachel, and thank you for all your hard work. Premature death among those experiencing homeless, we know, is so pervasive throughout the United States, and it really has illustrated the effects of health disparities. And until we're able to identify the specific causes of mortality and address the more systemic issues related to homelessness, including poverty, racism, domestic violence, lack of affordable housing, and accessible primary and behavioral health services, will we be able to end homelessness. Mortality reviews are essential in identifying service gaps in communities and better understanding the impact of homelessness on declining health and premature disability and mortality. Data from these reviews enable communities to better craft public policy and develop collaborative interventions in response to this information. Homelessness increases causes of death related to substance use disorders, chronic diseases, including cancer and heart disease, and a number of other behavioral health disorders. It is for this reason that service providers with sufficient mortality data can make specific recommendations to mitigate early mortality, including a focus on harm reduction, suicide prevention programs, integrated behavioral health services, and access to low barrier preventative health care. Fragmentation of health services and a lack of consistent follow-up precludes the ability of persons experiencing homelessness to access outpatient preventative care. A mortality review in our community recently enabled service providers to enhance the provision of integrated outreach services. It's allowed us to improve access to harm reduction initiatives and to focus more on community partnerships to minimize emergency room utilization. In addition, we've really improved upon tailored chronic disease management strategies. Discussions in our communities should focus on improved data collection around causes of death and improving standardization in reporting mortality. This information can be used to inform policy and educate our stakeholders and shape clinical interventions. In one of the richest countries in the world, no one should have to live or die homeless. And today we honor those who have died by continuing to fight for the living. Thank you.
Pia and Rachel, thank you so much. And I want to thank all of you who joined us today. There were a little bit over 200 people actually at the height of our attendance. And it just shows the commitment that our community, the homeless advocacy community, has to the issue of homelessness. And I thank everyone who presented. Jeff, thank you for your song. Charlotte, thank you for your poem. Megan, thank you for putting together the names for the moment of silence. Bobby, we thank you for your keynote. Rachel and Pia, we also thank you for your advocacy. This was an event that was amazing. I know 30 years ago, Matt Vega and John Logier and Sue Watler Phillips and Michael Stoops didn't think we'd still be here 30 years from then, but we are here. But let us all be reminded that we should not stop fighting. We should fight for the living. We should always memorialize those that we have lost. And please, we should never be satisfied with how many people are living on the streets in our country. Again, I thank you for joining us. Have a wonderful evening and have a wonderful holiday season. Thank you all.
Thanks, Donald.
So we will end our live broadcast and also end the Zoom meeting. Thank you so much, everyone. Again, please have a wonderful holiday season.